Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Live with NORML. I'm J.M. Padini, the Development Director for the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. It's Friday, March 15th, 2024. You know what that means, friends? It's time to answer your burning questions live. Hey, we're also going to talk about all the cannabis news for the week, science, policy, legislation, you name it. We're going to talk about it. Hey, do me a favor. Wherever you're watching, go ahead and hit that like, follow, or subscribe button so you never miss when NORML goes live. And then drop a note in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from. Hey, Delaware NORML, I see you on Instagram. I see you. Okay, all right. What do the dollar bills mean? The one with stamps on them. I don't know what that means. Hey, Minnesota NORML. Hey, Richard and Brandermill. Hey, Wade, happy Friday. Hey, Pot calls the kettle bong. Good to see you, friend. Hey, Chucky from New Jersey. I don't know what you're talking about, Roz and Ron. We don't have stamps. I see you, Chesterfield, Hampton Roads, Woodbridge. All right. Interesting show today. It's probably going to be long because we're going to have some friends join us later. So we're going to get through the news real quick. And I hope you have questions. Hey, Fred, good to see you. Okay, I don't know what that means. All right. Ma'ams, you're funny. All right, so the big news for today and what leads us up to our special guests for this afternoon. A longtime NORML activist, Chris Goldstein, is a recipient of a presidential pardon for a federal marijuana possession charge. And today, Chris joined Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear and other people at the White House to meet with Vice President Kamala Harris to discuss federal cannabis policy and the reform efforts by the Biden administration. A little bit of this, a very tiny bit of this, was live streamed by the White House. You can check that out on NORML's Facebook and on our blog. I'll go ahead and drop that blog link in here for you. You can watch the very short video on the blog. I mean, don't do it now because we're hanging out. But Chris is going to join us in a little bit and tell us about the experience. So will NORML political director Morgan Fox, NORML deputy director Paul Armentano, and Sonia Norton, who is the senior legislative assistant for Representative Earl Blumenauer. They're going to talk about what happened this afternoon. This afternoon. It's after 1. It was after 1. All right. Hey, Tree, good to see you. Hey, Sue, good to see you. Happy Friday to you as well, Ellie. Oh, whatever. Okay. Good Friday to you as well, Ellie, then. So, hey, hang out with us for a bit, and hopefully we'll have some special guests in a little bit. Speaking of pardons, not to be outdone, Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey announced that she will be issuing pardons for misdemeanor marijuana convictions. There are all of those great details for you. Hey, Instagram friends, first of all, thank you for joining us. So happy we can finally stream on those platforms now. But unfortunately, I can't share the links with you. Don't worry. After the live, I'll go drop them in the chat. But you can find all of these links I'm talking about at NORML.org on the blog or in the news section. I see your questions on Instagram. Thoughts on Virginia Governor Youngkin vetoing the bill for job protections dealing with cannabis? You know, that's really an excellent question as to what he's going to do with all of the cannabis bills. Really, he hasn't. This is the first year he's vetoed one, and that doesn't really bode well for the rest of them. I'm not, Tom. It doesn't bode well for the rest of them. But you know what? We're just gonna wait and see. I'm not a gambler, friend. So hopefully, at the very least, he would offer amendments if he has a problem with it instead of just straight vetoing it. Hey, Humble, good to see you. Ellie asks about the Virginia legislative session is over, by the way, for people who don't know. So those bills have a deadline. It is April 8th. Is Ellie? Ellie, if only there were a website for that. The governor's action deadline is 11:59 p.m. on April 8th. Thanks for asking, Ellie. Hey, Ryan, welcome back. Good to see you. Yeah, so thanks, Governor Healy in Massachusetts, for issuing those pardons. Hey, Wade. What are you confused about, Wade? How federal, state, and tribal laws coalesce? I mean, when it comes to cannabis laws, they don't. They just exist in conflict of each other, honestly. Hey, Alex in Texas on Instagram. What Alex in Texas is saying, help us in Texas. What can I do? Alex, most importantly, you want to connect with Texas NORML. You can find them at texasnormal.org. Make sure you get involved. They're a really fantastic NORML chapter, and they're doing great work. Second, Alex, know that elections have consequences. And if you, not you personally, Alex, but if your state keeps electing people who are terrible on cannabis policy, you're going to have terrible cannabis policies. That reminds me of an email that we got yesterday where someone was mad about the Virginia governor, and that's what you get. You elect terrible people, you get terrible policies. So, Alex, make sure you vote. Make sure everyone you know is registered to vote and voting in every election. And if you're wondering who you should be voting for, I know that Texas NORML has a voter guide, which probably goes down a little bit more locally than the NORML voter guide does, but you can check out vote.norml.org so you can be an informed cannabis voter. Hey, Tony. Hey, Tony in Australia. Good to see you here. Lil J, nothing new for Virginia yet. Yeah, Alex, and back to Alex in Texas. You do have a medical program in Texas that's kind of limited. It's a great place to focus on legislation that you could move forward. You could get some expansion in your medical program. Hey, Humble. That sucks. Glad nothing went down. Hey, Wade. Wade has questions about the dispensary opening in on tribal land in Cherokee, North Carolina. Wade says, I'd assume that when the dispensary in North Carolina opens, they'd have checkpoints or profile people coming and going from Cherokee. Very possibly could, Wade. Very possibly could. All right, let's dip into this news here. Which one's? You know what? I like this one. I like this story. So we'll do this one next. There was a study done, and this is. I think this pairs nicely with the one we discussed last week about migraines. This is another study about migraines, and in particular, the researchers indicated that this is the largest study of its kind done so far. This was asking migraine sufferers about cannabis, medical cannabis, and how effective is it, and also how it affected their prescription drug use. And what will come is no surprise to any of you, a majority of the patients surveyed reported that they not only use cannabis for migraine pain management and occurrence management, they had reductions in both pain and frequency, but also that they reduced or eliminated their use of prescription drugs for migraine because they had access to medical cannabis. Yeah, Sean, I can't see that. I can't see if someone can tell me is that a parody account or do I need to ban it? Because I love to ban people. It just brings me such a joy. All right. Oh, interesting. Hey, Humble, thanks for sharing that info about the study. All right, on it. Thanks for letting me know, Humble. Yeah, we've seen studies like that regarding topical application of cannabinoids in cancer cells and studies relating to cannabis and melanoma specifically. Here we go. Let's talk about depression and PTSD. That sounds fun. There was a study done, and patients with PTSD and depression reported significant improvements following cannabis therapy. I know, I'm sure that's very surprising to all of you. Very, very, very surprising to know. All right, here we go. Speaking of more things that you all love to hear, but that aren't surprising, I got two more for you. And then I hope you got some questions. Humble, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing. An analysis was done involving chronically ill patients who have access to cannabis therapy, and they had improvements in their quality of life. 84% of patients surveyed reported quality of life improvements following their use of cannabis. It's a pretty high number. Should have gotten more water before I started the show. I always think there's more in there because of the can hole. The Yeti is heavy and it's not. All right, one more. If I can get it out. One more news for you all, and this is in the same boat again. Things you've heard before, but you love to hear again. Hey, the kids are all right. In fact, this analysis, which is consistent with other studies, uh, does indicate that the initiation of state licensed cannabis sales is not independently associated with any increase in cannabis use among adolescents. And this is a study that was published in the journal Addictive Behaviors. Oh, good, I had a water up in the top shelf, so I didn't have to crawl in the fridge. I love that. Hey, everyone who just joined us on Instagram. We have a few events for you all to keep on your horizon. Tree says if the politicians were so worried about the children, they would take mental health more seriously. Tell me more, Tree. Hey, I want to tell you about another. I'm going to read this from. I don't have a link for you. I'm not that prepared, but I did want to tell you about a show that Suncoast NORML does on Sundays. They broadcast live on Sundays at 11 a.m. I'm sure you can find out more about the rotation on Suncoast NORML's channels. But this weekend, this Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern, NORML board member Dan Viets will be jumping in the rotation. And the show is hosted by Suncoast NORML and NORML board of director member Chris Cano. So, hey, check that out at 11 on Sunday. All right, speaking of events coming up, some big ones. April 17th in Washington, D.C. at the Martin Luther King Jr. Public Library. April 17th, the National Cannabis Policy Summit. Come see me and Morgan. Maybe Paul, but come see me and Morgan, definitely. At the National Cannabis Policy Summit in Washington, D.C. on April 17th. Dropping that link in the chat for you all right now. Friends on Instagram, you can find out more on the National Cannabis Festival website, nationalcannabisfestival.com. And you can find the summit link on there somewhere. It is under experiences, under the experiences tab on nationalcannabisfestival.com. Find out more information about the National Cannabis Policy Summit. Come see NORML there. Coming up right after the Cannabis Policy Summit is the National Cannabis Festival. Congratulations to our friends at NCF on expanding their event to a 2-day festival now. It is April 19th and 20th at RFK Stadium on the festival grounds in Washington, D.C. You can get tickets and learn more, see the lineups for both days at nationalcannabisfestival.com. Hey, Normonius on Instagram asking, can we pressure lawmakers to have cannabis removed from the DEA schedule, just like alcohol? Yes, you can. In fact, Morgan and I were just discussing an action alert specific to descheduling. There's a lot of talk around rescheduling. HHS made the recommendation that marijuana be moved out of Schedule 1 and put into Schedule 3, effectively doing nothing, still maintaining every conflict between state and federal cannabis laws that are in conflict today. So yes, descheduling is what needs to happen. Hi, Mams. Mams is asking if Virginia NORML will be at Shamrock the Block this weekend or Irish Fest. The answer is no. No. No, we will not. We will not be at Shamrock the Block this year. It's a fun event, but I don't really like the new location, and we just didn't get a lot of traffic last year, so it wasn't worth it for us to go. But hey, maybe we'll have an event soon over at 3 Notched or something. They have a big space, and they're always very nice to us. You're welcome, Normonius. So stay tuned for that action alert on our website. You can find all of our action alerts and not just for federal, but for state legislation as well at norml.org/act. We are currently tracking 55 bills. There's action alerts for 55 bills on the NORML website right now. Hey, Brian. Welcome to the show. Brian is asking if Governor Youngkin in Virginia has signed or vetoed. He's only vetoed the House version of parental rights protections. There's still a Senate version. That's the only bill as of 4 o'clock. That's the only bill he has taken action on. It's related to cannabis. Brian also asks if session is over. Yes, session is over. And if he does nothing, does a bill take effect? If he doesn't take action on a bill, then yes, a bill will just take effect if it had been approved. It's not likely to be the case for any of these bills, though. Hello, Hippogator 3. Thanks for joining us. Okay. Speaking of 420, if you are in the Philly area, I got something wildly entertaining for you coming up here. Weeding Out the Stoned is a hilarious show. It's called The Game Show of Sobriety Tests. A group of players enter the game, and they're all high except for one of them. And it's up to the audience, along with the host, to help find the person who isn't high, so the entire audience can win prizes. This is April 20th in Philadelphia at Helium Comedy Club. I'm going to give you a link to that. Hey, everyone on Instagram, you know what? Weeding Out the Stoned is on Instagram, so you can find them there and get the link to their show there at Helium Comedy Club. One more event to tell you about. I can see our special guests logging on, joining us. Paul, you have a really horrible light right above your head. Maybe see if you can move that. All right. May 30th through June 1st, NORML is headed back to the Gantt for the NORML Aspen Legal Seminar. If you're an attorney who needs continuing legal education credits, we are fully accredited for every state that requires CLEs for their attorneys. If you're not an attorney or you just don't need CLEs, welcome to join us. In fact, we have a discounted rate for you if you're not an attorney or if you don't need CLEs. Those rooms at the Gantt, those are going to sell out quickly, though. So if you're thinking about joining us, reserve your room now. Head over to norml.org/Aspen. Get your tickets. Come hang out with us in Aspen. It's amazing. All right. All right. I can see. Oh, no, everyone's not here. We're still waiting for Chris. All right, friends. For those of you, I see Chris getting in the studio right now as well. For those of you just joining us, we have 4 special guests joining us this afternoon for a conversation about a really amazing thing that happened earlier today. Longtime NORML activist and member Chris Goldstein went to a roundtable discussion at the White House with Vice President Kamala Harris to talk about what the Biden administration is doing when it comes to federal cannabis policy. There was a very tiny bit of that live streamed. You can see that on the NORML blog right now, but don't leave to watch that because we have everyone here to talk to you in person. Let's see how this works. I don't know if we have I'm just going to introduce, I'm going to bring you on one at a time because I don't think we have a 4-person layout, Morgan.
Oh, we'll deal with it.
We sure will. Hey, everyone. This is Morgan Fox. He's the NORML political director. I'm going to hang out here in the background, Morgan, and I will make sure everyone can see everyone. If you want to introduce yourself and then introduce your guests.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Jam. A pretty spectacular day where NORML had an opportunity to interact directly with the White House and with the Department of Justice about the things that the administration is doing to help repair the harms caused by prohibition. But I want to let the man himself who was there talk about it. So I'd like to introduce Chris Goldstein, who is our PA, New Jersey, Delaware, and general that whole area coordinator, and has been working with us for longer than I've been even in this movement.
Thanks for making me seem real old today. That's okay. I'm feeling young. I have been at this for, I've been working with NORML for, I was looking at the other day, 26 years, if you can believe that. And I'm 48 years old. So that is most of my adult life. And it's about half the time that marijuana has been federally prohibited under the CSA. So, but yeah, it was Morgan, it was really interesting to be in the real Roosevelt room at the White House today with Vice President Harris and have this discussion. I have to say, it really went awesome. And everybody in the room, including everybody there, got a sense of it being the beginning of more events like this and more engagement on the topic of marijuana reform and also criminal justice reform through that. You and I know, and we've been doing this long enough, that what's interesting and I think pivotal about our movement is that it gives legislators space to innovate on policy. So all of a sudden we're addressing legalization, and they're talking about even bigger reforms too, about criminal justice reforms. But today was all about the pardons and the idea of clemency. And really, they've done this clemency. Again, we've asked for broad clemency from the White House for a long time. The White House can grant individual clemency. And actually today, I also, not only did I get to go to the White House, I got to meet the U.S. pardon attorney whose name is on my certificate. And I got to go over to their office too. And the two people, Dexter, who you heard from today and saw during the discussion today, he was also got a pardon from President Biden. He went through an individual pardon process, and that included having investigators come to his house. And Dexter actually served 4 months in prison for using a telecommunications device, basically texting somebody on his phone about buying some marijuana, a small amount. But that's how he
Let's back this up a little bit. Tell the people why you needed a pardon in the first place and how you ended up getting that pardon.
Yeah, so I was arrested at a protest in Philadelphia at Independence Hall National Historic Park. There's a cool outdoor free speech area that we used to do some marijuana protesting. And we committed to doing this once a month for a year. We would go out at 4:20 p.m. and light up some joints. That was our act of civil disobedience. And for the first 6 months, there were no arrests and no citations. We just went out there and took some pictures, basically. But on 4/20/2013, about 1,000 people showed up, and we had a grand old time, let me tell you, great photos, and no one was arrested. But when we showed up in May, there was about 400 tactically armed law enforcement officers waiting for us, and the U.S. attorney there outside waiting to prosecute us, like on the spot, essentially. I ended up getting 2 citations for smoking marijuana at those protests, and then they took me to federal court over 0.5 gram of cannabis. So 10 years ago this month, I stood before a federal judge in Philly, and I can tell you it was one of the scariest moments of my life. The judge gave me a sentence of a $3,000 cash fine, 24 months of probation, a permanent federal criminal record. And the judge said to me that he had strongly considered putting me in prison for 30 days, just to make a point. This was, again, over 0.5 gram possession in a national park. So it was really for holding a bullhorn, but they can't charge you for that.
Well, in the intervening time, how has that charge negatively impacted your life?
It's funny, Morgan. As a Quaker and somebody who takes protesting, I process it for other activities. I considered my sentence and seeing it through part of the protest, but having the record had some unfortunate unintended consequences, really, and unforeseen, even for me. As a parent and somebody who's just in your normal life, having your record searched is now a pretty commonplace thing. And having a federal marijuana record, it doesn't really show how much. It doesn't say for 0.5 gram. It just says federal drug record. And so that actually is language that can prevent you from doing a lot of things as a parent or as a citizen. So it got in the way of a few things. I'm an adjunct instructor at university level, and there are jobs I would like to apply for, but the technicality of the hiring language would have prevented it. Now, the pardon doesn't get rid of my record, and we have to be clear about that my record is not expunged. I would like that to happen. And I think the White House might even want that to happen, but Congress will have to act to expunge records even at the lowest level for possession, like mine. And to that end, we were on the Hill the other day sort of talking about that and the prospects for that. But today at the White House, what I heard was they were hearing the stories of the clemency that has been enacted. And I hear all the signs directly. I mean, this is not signaling, this is words directly spoken, that they want to expand this effort and that they want to explore more that they can do with clemency when it comes to correcting the wrongs of the drug war. And
that's an excellent segue as well. We have another guest with us, Sonia Norton, who is a legislative assistant for Representative Earl Blumenauer. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about some of the efforts that your office has been making in terms of pressuring the administration as well as the DOJ to expand these efforts.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think definitely what Chris hit on and you hit on as well, that this is a huge moment, a historic event to have at the White House, and definitely the first step in a lot larger effort that we need to see from the administration. Great to see them engaging on this. But as folks may have seen, my boss, Congressman Earl Blumenauer, together with Congresswoman Barbara Lee, as well as 36 additional signatures, members of Congress wrote to the president encouraging him to kind of build on this momentum and uphold his campaign promises to really grant clemency to the many individuals who are still facing incarceration, still facing the consequences of nonviolent offenses on their criminal records for marijuana actions, many of which are now legal in their states. And so we definitely see opportunity for the administration to go further, to do more for expanding these clemencies, building on this momentum, and lots of positive feedback that they've gotten on the actions they have taken so far. And definitely, like you guys are right, Chris is right, that Congress needs to do more to act on expungements so that we get pardons, hopefully, in the meantime. And then as soon as we have a more marijuana-friendly majority, speaking as a Democrat here, when we take back the majority, definitely want to see like the gold standard of marijuana legalization, the MORE Act, get across the finish line and finally get expungements for folks, so that these offenses that really never should have been scheduled, that never should be something that people have to face in the way that we have for 50 years, we can finally actually get that fully off people's records.
Thank you very much for all of your efforts in this area, Sonia. It's definitely been a pleasure to work with you, and I think there's a lot of stuff that we can continue to do in this area when it comes to congressional action and working with whatever administration is in the White House, regardless. I want to bring in our colleague, Paul Armentano, real quick, just to kind of talk a little bit about really what has been going on at the federal level in terms of the discussion about rescheduling versus descheduling before we get back into what Chris experienced today and what he learned from folks at the White House and the Department of Justice.
Thanks, Morgan. This is the $1 million question. I think our audience is sort of sitting and waiting for an answer. And we heard even earlier today, Vice President Kamala Harris, she called the existing Schedule I status of marijuana absurd and patently unfair. And she publicly asked the DEA to move expeditiously to make this decision. But as folks who are familiar with this process know, we're kind of on the DEA's timeline, for better or worse. They are the agency that is the final arbiters of this decision. And historically, they have taken their time in issuing these decisions. Hopefully, we are now at a time when there is enough public pressure and political pressure on this agency that it is going to force them to move in a much more expeditious manner than they have in the past. But until that day comes and the DEA makes that decision, we're all really in a wait and see mode.
Yeah, and Paul, you can still hear me, right? I think that the DEA's process here, I think what was it, years last time they took on a scheduling review. I know they can't take years this time with the White House compelling it, but to the same extent, they do have a habit of running out the clock. So let's not forget the DEA is no fan. We all kind of wondered, and this week there were some hints that they would defend Schedule 1. And that I'm happy to have the DEA do that, because let's let the DEA be the DEA. They're going to defend Schedule 1. HHS is going to recommend Schedule 3. To me, that sets up the decisive action that the White House really needs to take, which is to deschedule cannabis. I think that as the confusion gets further and further, I think it makes the case for executive action on this more definitive.
Yeah, and I think, Chris, I would agree with you in part and disagree with you in part, because I think it makes the case for Congress having to make the definitive action. It's Congress that enacted the prohibition of marijuana. It's Congress that made the initial decision to classify cannabis as a Schedule I substance. And ultimately, the power and the jurisdiction lies with Congress to make a change in that policy. While I wish I could say definitively it lied with the president, I'm not convinced that it does.
I'll also hop in there as well. And certainly Congress has responsibility here for how we got here and has the option and the power to deschedule. But we've also seen DEA for the first time really proactively confirm that they have the ability to deschedule under the Controlled Substances Act. They responded to a letter that my boss led with fellow Cannabis Caucus co-chairs on the merits of descheduling, and in their response confirmed the DEA does have final say on scheduling, rescheduling, or descheduling. And so we still obviously would love to see descheduling from DEA, but certainly with HHS's recommendation of Schedule 3 would be a step in the right direction, and we're going to continue to work on it in Congress.
I have to say that's what's weird. I mean, I feel that the rescheduling thing is getting us lost in the weeds here a little bit. I think that the focus and what we're seeing from a lot of members of Congress too is a focus on descheduling. I think that what's tough right now is that the White House is in a position for the first time to take on these larger issues and to have these broad stroke impacts. but Congress doesn't really have the plan to follow up right now. There's like 27 bills, and in essence, I think that if Congress were able to express to the White House that they have a plan for after descheduling, the White House might take a broader action on it. I think that rescheduling doesn't give Congress enough really room to move. It doesn't really incorporate the reforms. Working from New Jersey, I can tell you that the conflict between federal and state law in the $2 billion economy we've built around cannabis in just 3 years in New Jersey is profound at this point. And that the legislation that I see on the table in Congress hasn't really kept up to speed, even with the reforms that we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years. So again, the White House is in this position to deschedule cannabis. We're talking about the DEA having the power to do it and actually having a reality for the first time. But what we need is a plan from Congress that incorporates an executive action like that and follow up really quick.
Well, I think with Schedule 3 or rescheduling in general, that's still, I think, what we see in the MORE Act is that path forward of deschedule that would finally remove marijuana from the CSA, enact crucial criminal justice reforms, restorative provisions for communities that have been targeted, and would be adapted to a Schedule 3 piece. I think Schedule 3 is a step in the right direction, but it's certainly not the end of the path, and I don't think it gets in the way of kind of the path that congressional Democrats and also our colleagues across the aisle have put forward. And we're definitely we will have to adapt a little bit of the language, but most of it is the purpose is to get marijuana out of the CSA so that it is no longer criminalized in this way, and so that we can start to regulate it like substances that are already on the market and federally legal. And that is what we're here to do, and we'll adapt if we get Schedule 3.
I saw a question from Tom Angel come up. Tom says, Chris, you tweeted that VP Harris said in your private meeting today, we need to legalize marijuana. And he says it's the first time she said that. Yeah, I have to say it was a striking moment. Vice President Harris was sitting at the front of the table underneath a portrait of Theodore Roosevelt on his horse in the Roosevelt Room. And she raised her hands and she said, I'm just going to say it. We need to legalize marijuana. And taking a moment to express it exactly that clearly. Again, I think that what we're seeing is the White House adapt to the communication that we need with our community here. 100 years of prohibition have made us a little prickly. So I think that they're learning how to interact with us as much as we are with them.
So Chris, something that you told me privately after this meeting that I think is really important for this audience to hear is, a lot of folks remember the record of President Joe Biden and the record of Vice President Harris when it comes to drug policy and when it comes to marijuana policy specifically. And let's not be shy about it. It's not a great record. Both of these folks were involved in enacting policies that, to their credit, now they are trying to amend. And one of the things that I think was really important that you said came out of this meeting was Vice President Harris acknowledged her past as a prosecutor, and explained how she has evolved on this issue. And she talked a little bit about her journey. And frankly, I think that's a message that it would be great for more Americans to hear, so they don't think this is just some cynical pre-election ploy for votes, but that these folks have really evolved. And not only do they want to change marijuana policy in the future, they actually want to address, they want to provide relief for the folks that were hurt by the very policies they formerly advocated. So perhaps you want to weigh in a little bit on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that one of the striking things about today was that Vice President Harris took on her record head on. She talked about her experience as a prosecutor in San Francisco. That's an elected position, by the way, there. So that, it's a political office in its own way, but she was the prosecutor in San Francisco back in 2005. And again, she talks in context of having experience with it. President Biden himself was a different kind of what we call drug warrior. He wasn't a prosecutor, but he ended up promoting some bills that threw a lot of people in prison. And I do think that is what is poignant about this moment, Paul, is that we've asked every White House for 54 years to do something, anything, and take executive action in some positive direction, especially when it comes to just broad clemency of any sort. This is the first White House to do that. We thought Carter might do it, didn't happen. We wished Obama would do it, still a super fan, didn't happen. But the fact that Biden and Harris do have this history as drug warriors makes their sort of way to chart a path to the resolution more poignant. And the fact that they're willing to put it in context of their own history. Again, let's make no mistake. In New Jersey, where I live, 3 million voters came out 3 years ago and voted to legalize cannabis. As a block of voters, we've changed state constitutions, legalized marijuana, and we show up at the polls. And we're not one party either. We're a broad base. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely a notion here that politicians want to reach out to us in this election year. But I think that we're also, after 100 years of prohibition, we're not easy to win with empty promises. I think that the truth is that this White House has delivered actual executive action. They've screwed up their messaging mightily at times. But have they done the executive actions that advocates like me have asked 50 years for? Absolutely. But I agree with you. I think that the fact that they're willing to put it in context of their own experience is important in this moment, because as a Quaker, I know this is going to sound cheesy in a way, but I work for peace. But when the warriors declare peace, when they lay down their arms, it really sticks. So I think it's really interesting what's happening.
And it's definitely a testament to the work that a lot of people on the call have done, that you both have done, and that like congressional leaders across the country have taken to really get to this point of historic public support from Democrats, majorities of Democrats, Republicans, and independents. We saw the results for Biden himself kind of setting the tone in Arizona. We've seen with Senate races that this is a political issue that does matter, and it's also good policy, and we love when those intersect. And yeah, it's been huge to see this transition, and just really want to double down on the point that this is the first time we've seen something like this from an administration. And is there significant room to do more? Absolutely. And we're going to keep pressure on and working with the administration to do that. But it is an incredible moment to get to this point.
And on Schedule 3, back to voters, I mean, was there ever a ballot initiative to move marijuana to Schedule 3 at the state level? I don't think voters would have been cool with that. Voters went further than Congress is even considering. Voters did not incrementally legalize marijuana. They did it in a big leap. And we have to remember, when the CSA was created, it was not a small incremental reform. It was a gigantic prohibition. So again, the idea of Schedule 3 being even an incremental solution right now makes me nervous as a consumer and as somebody who's worked at the state level on this. I don't think any state would consider putting marijuana in Schedule 3 of their CSA after they regulated it for adult use. And I don't think that the Schedule 3 model really works. Again, Sonia, I don't walk out and get a ketamine smoothie and sprinkle a little craft codeine into it at my anabolic steroid cafe, thinking about all the awesome 280E tax breaks that Schedule 3 over-the-counter businesses have. It doesn't happen. So I can't buy it. I'm too old to sell this stuff to. So I am going to keep focusing on descheduling. I really do think that is because I think in any other period, again, it's because a window of opportunity is open for it. I think it's important to strike while the iron's hot, because I don't think that the window is going to be open forever.
Yeah, and to be clear, like we absolutely, Congressman Blumenauer has been pushing for descheduling, I think, longer than anybody else in Congress, and it's a huge priority. And Schedule 3 is a huge step in that direction. A willingness to finally get it out of Schedule 1 and acknowledge that marijuana was scheduled on substance, or on stigma, not substance, not on the science, and that it's time to at least reschedule as a step in the right direction. And then I think it's up to the rest of us, to Congress, to the advocates, to the public, to really hold us all accountable to continue down the right path and make sure that is a step in the right direction.
I'm going to really scare you now, Sonia, and tell you what New Jersey does. Ready? Do you know what New Jersey does right now, and Pennsylvania and New York and Delaware? They, at the state level, dual schedule cannabis. You realize that New Jersey, New York, Delaware, and Pennsylvania haven't removed marijuana from the state Schedule 1 in their CSAs, but they've created new legal definitions for cannabis. So now you have quantum cannabis, where the same plant exists in different galaxies of the law simultaneously. What if the DEA does that? What if the DEA doesn't like moving marijuana from Schedule 1, but does like describing medical cannabis as Schedule 3? I think, again, if they took a lesson from the states, it would be a bad example, and we'd be in an even more complicated mess. So I don't like the DEA. They don't like us. They do mean, nasty things. And when it comes to policy, they run out the clock. What was the last one, Paul? 8 years before they showed up in court? Seriously. So the idea that the DEA is the final authority on this, also, I hear you. Administratively, DEA is final authority, but let's be clear. President Biden can send a letter to the HHS directing descheduling at any time. And it's the same letter that was sent for the scheduling review. I see what happened with the scheduling review as due diligence for descheduling. And quite frankly, the answers are getting back from the DEA. I love it. Keep doing it. Keep having the HHS and DEA in conflict, because that's when executive action can solve it.
And I think that's, to get back to today's event, was what I found very, very encouraging to see the vice president put that pressure on timing. DEA is independent, but to have that level of executive kind of watch and pressure is something we haven't seen before, and something that I think will move us in the right direction at the very least.
Yeah, I do think that is one fundamental difference between this effort and all the previous ones is A, we've never known what HHS recommended DEA to do. And we've been well aware now for some time what HHS has recommended. And we've certainly never had pressure from an administration where the DEA knows that they are being very closely watched with respect to when they make this decision and what decision they make. And that leverage may encourage this agency to act in a way this time that they never have previously.
JM pointed out that they removed marijuana from the CSA entirely from, cannabis is removed entirely from the state CSA in Virginia. So that's good news. Again, that looks forward to this. And we tried to talk them into that in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New York, but they refused to address the scheduling at the state level. So I'm glad to hear that JM and Virginia dealt with that, because I think that if every state would do that, it's key. There's a sunset clause too. When we talk about Schedule 3 or descheduling, some state medical marijuana laws and even some state CSAs have some sunset clauses that would trigger at that moment. So that is an interesting aspect of this, but that's nothing that we covered in the White House today.
Yeah, and to quickly get back to the White House, and Morgan, I don't know how much time we have. Are there other key moments, points in the discussion that folks who are not in the room should be aware of, that we should be thinking about for follow-up, for next steps?
Well, I think that ACLU's clemency director was there. There was a really good mix in the room and at the table. And it wasn't just the three of us and the vice president and the governor of Kentucky and Fat Joe. There were some policy people at the table too. And I think that's also important. I think that as somebody who works in Congress, you know how important it is who's at the table for a meeting. So today felt not only having somebody like Fat Joe there, it kind of made a more organic discussion, but it felt less buttoned down, but it also didn't feel less substantial because of that. I think that there was a more than a pledge. I think that this really felt like the first of rather than a one-off. So I think that the White House wants to keep doing this and they want to keep working on it, and I'm here for it. So I'm really grateful to be invited today. Again, like I've used this line, but it's totally true. Like if you watch Parks and Recreation, like I am Amy Poehler right now. I am Leslie Doe. Like going to the White House is just a really cool experience. The vice president's staff treated us really nicely. And I have to say, I was really impressed on how up to speed. I remain impressed on how up to speed everybody is on marijuana policy over there. They are not considering this as just, casual. They're really dug into this policy. And again, I'm here for it. And I'm glad for it. It's the first time we've had a White House working with us like this. So I'm grateful.
Amazing.
Yeah, Morgan, are you still there? Where'd our political director go? We don't want to, and you want to make sure you get all the questions, but we're just about 3 minutes, 3 minutes in. Paul, you were saying that it's interesting that, again, the words are everything, but she did take a moment to do this, and there were cameras in the room. So the stuff that happened in the room will come out. It was a private discussion. And again, not everybody at the table was an activist. The two other people Dexter and Michelle have very compelling stories. They really had these federal marijuana convictions at the low level chase them for many years. And again, I think another interesting thing for me is I consider myself a super nerd on this topic, especially But I didn't really realize that the December 23 proclamation by President Biden covered so many offenses other than possession. And that the power of the pardon, Michelle's case, it used to be that they would send a van with investigators to your house if you applied for an individual pardon, which scared people away. I was already in court. Do I want the FBI at my house for the pardon process? But actually, the December proclamation made it so that they don't have to go that route to issue every pardon anymore. So in Michelle's case, she had filed the individual pardon, but because of the December proclamation, they were able to speed it up and issue it right away. So I think that although we've looked at this as just a blanket pardon, let's see what happens next. I think that it may cover more people than we realized. And honestly, I'm going to dig more into that. And that's one of the points about today. They want to do more awareness, like, okay, let's get more people applying for these things now that we figured out all the people who are eligible.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And I know it's one you brought up leading into your meeting, was the idea that there is now a portal on the Department of Justice website, and there is a way for people with a few clicks to go ahead and see if they're eligible and file for that actual written pardon proclamation. And this is really something I think more people need to be aware of, and they need to know really in many ways how simple the process is. And hopefully that message starts to resonate more as well. Because as you said correctly, this was a broad spectrum of folks who can be reached by these pardons, but many of them may be unaware that this process has even begun.
Yeah. Well, that's what they hope to raise awareness for. And again, I think that every time they talk about it and the more people get pardons, I think, again, it adds to a lot of the work that this movement has done on clemency and so many members of Congress have given voice to. So like I tell my grassroots activists at home, keep it up. It's working. So keep at it. The messaging on clemency is resonating. And I think that if we keep asking for these things, these are the things that we can definitely achieve.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think your personal story, Chris, really speaks to the power of being very public and open in your advocacy. You and I have been doing this long enough that there was a time where a lot of people, for lack of a better phrase, who cared about this issue or maybe who used cannabis themselves were in the closet. We're in a very different cultural time now where it's much more easy for folks to be open and honest about their cannabis use and advocating for it. But nonetheless, you're someone who's never been shy about it. You've always been open about it. You've always been open in telling your story. And I think that's one of the reasons you were one of the 3 people sitting at the table today with Vice President Harris, because of the fact you've always been so open and public in your advocacy work.
I have to say it was a real privilege to have Vice President Harris shake my hand and say thank you for your activism and advocacy. It was definitely a highlight of my work and my career. And again, I think it's important that as a Quaker and as an activist that when people are willing to work with you, that you reach across and work back. So as a movement, we need to learn a little bit how to do that. We have been protesting for a long time, but now we don't have to protest as much because we have to get down to the nitty gritty here and actually do that legislative work. It really is a good moment here for us. Thank you though, Paul. I appreciate all that, by the way. So everybody knows Paul is my greatest editor. I only really write and sound as awesome is because Paul edits my work. So thank you, Paul.
Well, thank you, Chris, and thank you for all your activism. And thank you, Sonia, for all the work that Representative Blumenauer has done over the years. And again, anyone who's not aware of that track record, it is longer than both my own and Chris's.
Happy to do it. And yep, it's a priority. So always ideas, next steps, come talk to us.
So great to have everybody with us. Please stay tuned for additional developments, both administratively as well as legislatively. And anybody that is interested in talking about cannabis policy reform, contact Sonia Norton. She is hands down the best ally you could possibly have on this issue. And thank you very much, Paul and Chris, for coming out and for showing up for this incredibly important event. I'm going to pass it off to JM, and thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, Morgan. Chris, Paul, Sonia, everyone for participating. This has been a really exciting day for everyone at NORML. I know it's been super exciting for you, Chris, and Morgan in particular. And thank you all for taking time out of your afternoon to join Live with NORML and hang out with all these amazing people who are so interested in getting active with NORML, being amazing activists like Chris, leaders like Paul, and them hearing from you is so important. Thanks to everyone else who joined us this afternoon. I hope we got to answer as many of your burning questions as possible. Before we part ways for the weekend, friends, I do want to ask you a quick favor. Be sure you hit that like, follow, or subscribe button wherever you're watching so you never miss when NORML goes live. We try to do this every Friday at 4 o'clock. And hey, if you want to read more about what went down at the White House with Chris today and all the NORML news, we got you. It's going to go right to your inbox tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. All you have to do is go to norml.org/subscribe. Make sure you check the weekend weed read box so you get the weekend weed read about 9 a.m., 9:15 Eastern time. Go great with your morning coffee. Perfect way to kick off the weekend, chill out a little bit, and catch up on all the latest and greatest cannabis policy and science news. Hey, Sam on Instagram, thank you. Thank you for watching. David on Instagram, you're going to head to norml.org/subscribe. That's it. That's it. Sorry, you don't get to see the links the same way on Instagram, but and I'm not pasting anything in there right now because last time I did that, it shut down the feed. I'll do it afterward though. Hey friends, this has been a blast. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. I hope you all join us back here next Friday as well. Hey, this has been great. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you back here next time. Bye-bye.